Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm so happy to have you here. My name is Penny and this is Little by Little. Now in today's video we're going to be making the final piece of furniture for the homestead house, and that was the cream separator that sat in the porch. Now I don't remember a ton about the cream separator. I do remember that there were certainly cows on the farm and that there was a cow that got milked every day and that the milk would have had to have gone through that separator at some point. I do remember that I wasn't terribly interested in trying that milk right from the cow, because in my 6-year-old brain, if it didn't come from the milk jug from the store, it probably wasn't milk. I know, silly. I'm pretty sure what ended up happening was that Grandma would have poured that milk into one of those milk bottles, put it in the fridge, and after that I didn't know the difference. Anyway, I made the separator from a picture of the original one that sat in the house. And so I'll throw a picture up for you to have a look at so you can see what I was kind of up against. And hopefully by the time I'm done, you'll think I at least got close. Now normally there would be cutting instructions in the description box below. For this video, there are no cutting instructions, sorry. But we will have a look at some of the materials that I used to make the project. Okay, so I'm kidding around, kind of. This is my junk box. If you are the kind of miniaturist who likes to make things out of normal, everyday objects from your house, what most people might perceive as trash, then you probably have a box similar to this. So I'm going to be going through my box to see how many little pieces of this cream separator I can find already collected in this box. And then whatever's left, I'll have to make. So I found some pieces to at least get started with. So I had in my collection this little bowl, which I think I'm going to turn into the top section of the cream separator. It's not exactly the right shape on the top, but I think it'll be fine. And then I also have some small caps that I'll turn into this piece here. But some of these pieces will have to be trimmed down, obviously. But I think once I get them cut and trimmed, I think they'll work fine. And then I have these little wooden discs in a few different sizes. And this one I think will probably work for the stand that the pail sat on. So the only thing that I'm still not 100% on is the base itself. I may end up making that out of either polymer clay maybe, or I have some really thick wood dowels, which would give me a start, and maybe adding some polymer clay onto them for the shape might work as well. We'll have to see. I'm going to just take this one step at a time, and whatever works, works. And if I have to change gears, I have to change gears. That's just the way it's going to go. So the first thing I need to do is I need to figure out this little piece underneath the bowl, because my bowl does not have a base on it. So I'm going to have to make a base. So I have these little wood circles. This came in the same kit as this one. I think they're a dollar store purchase. And they're not very thick, so I'm going to double them up. And they do fit pretty closely to the bottom of that bowl. So I think they'll make a good base. So I'm going to glue those together first. I find I'm using this dimensional glue more and more often. It just adheres really well to plastic. Next, I'm going to work on these cream and skim milk covers. So these pieces that I'm going to be using are a little bit big, so I'm going to have to first cut them down. I smoothed out the edges just by rubbing it on some sandpaper. This little rubber piece was a lot easier to cut. I realized at this point that that white piece was just a little bit too rounded on top, so I needed to figure out a way to flatten it out. And the only way I was going to get through that hard plastic was with a saw. Once I got that flattened, I was able to glue the two pieces together using some dimensional glue. There was another smaller base underneath those two pieces, and so I have another little black cap that I'm going to use to make that part. I got pretty lucky with the size of those two. They're almost exactly the same. I'm going to work on this base next, and I've decided to just use a piece of wood dowel. And it looks like it goes back a fair bit, so I'll use two pieces put together. I noticed that that piece is rounded in front, so I'm going to cut off a small corner of each of these two pieces. A little bit of sanding gave it just the right amount of curve. I've glued them together now, and I'm going to clamp them to keep them tight together until the glue dries. I'm following the same process to make the lower part of this base. Moving on to this rectangle piece that separated the two. I was originally going to use this little black plastic piece, but I've decided that it's the wrong size, and so I'm just going to use this piece of 32nd millimeter wood instead. I'm rounding the corners off just a little bit. I didn't take a lot off, just enough to take the sharp edge off. You can see this old cream separator had a hand crank. So before I go any farther, I want to drill a hole in the top section so that I can apply that handle later. To create the handle, I first measured out how long I thought the black handle part should be. And then I'm going to go ahead and just draw a basic shape that I want to cut out to make that handle. Using my scoring tool, I'm just going to trace over those pencil lines now because it'll give my saw blade a little bit of a track to follow when I cut it out. I know the angle is horrible, but I wanted to show you this little jewelry saw. One of my subscribers, Lori, suggested that I have a look at one of these for cutting wood pieces that are curved or rounded off. And I'm telling you, it is a game changer, this little saw. For the top part of this handle, I found this little wooden bead which is almost exactly the right size and shape for that part of the handle. One side of the bead was already a little bit flat, so I just made it a little bit flatter so that the top of the handle piece would fit onto it a little bit easier. Now, I was originally going to use a pin to put that on, but I think the hole of the bead is just a little bit too big, so I found a piece of floral wire instead, and it fits a little bit better than a pin would. I'll need a piece about 20 millimeters long in order to have enough room to go through the bead and then into the base of the cream separator. I just want to test and make sure I've got the right length, so I'll pop this in and throw the bead on there just to make sure there isn't anything sticking out. There we go. Now I just need to complete the handle down at the bottom, and I'm just going to use a piece of toothpick to do that with. And there's our handle all put together. I'm just going to take some of this little excess glue off of here just so that it doesn't look too bulky. But I think we're ready to put the wire through. But I'm not going to put it on just yet because I'm afraid I might knock it off while I build the rest of it. So we'll just put it aside for now and we'll put it on a little bit later. So I'm going to go ahead now and glue the top section to that middle rectangle section. I'm trying to leave as even a space all the way around as I can, but I need to leave enough room in the back to fit the wood dowel that the top bowl will sit on top of. I also need to make sure that that hole I drilled for the handle stays on the right side of the base. Next, I'm going to attach that wood dowel to the center of the base that I created for the bottom of the bowl. Just make sure that it's as straight up and down as you can get it. Next on the list is this little black brace underneath the bowl, which I'm assuming was attached to the post that held it up there. I've cut 3 small pieces from a coffee stir stick to go on the bottom of that piece, and then I have another 3 pieces that will be on the side so that it looks like that brace wraps around. Now I'm going to glue on those 3 small pieces on the sides. Now the very bottom base of the cream separator was curved, so I am going to go in and shape that a little bit to add a little bit of a semicircle. And then we'll add that second set of blocks that I made, which will make up the bottom of the base. And I want to make sure that I'm trying to leave as even a space as I can on all four sides. So I've cut out a little template, and I'm just going to use that as a guide to draw a line, and then I'll just use my X-Acto knife to cut it out. I want to very carefully follow that line with my X-Acto knife so that I'm not carving out too much of that base. I'll take a little bit of sandpaper here just to smooth out those edges. I also need to make a little brace that held up that tray, and that tray was where the milk pail sat after you had separated the cream. Because that brace sat on an angle from the bottom of the base of the cream separator up to the tray, I'm just going to cut off about a 45-degree angle off of this wood dowel. I'm holding it up against the base just so I can get an idea of how long that pole needs to be. It turned out to be just about 1.5 inches long. I used the grid on my cutting mat to make sure that I had the angles right. I needed to make sure that that tray sat flat on the top side and sat against the side of the base on the bottom side. I still need to make these spouts, but I'm going to leave that till closer to the end. I can't put them on anyway until after everything is painted and put together. So I'm going to attach the post with the bowl on top to the back of that top section next. I'm going to take a piece of masking tape and put it over top of there as well. I just need something to hold it in place until the glue catches. I'm going to glue some of these other pieces together while I'm at it. We're ready for some paint now, so I'm going to paint a gold stripe around the bottom of those two pieces. And I always start with a layer of yellow before I put the gold on. I just find the gold adheres just a little bit better. Now a coat of gold will go over top of the yellow. The paint did seep underneath that tape just a little bit, so I'm just going to take some black paint and just touch up those areas where it's gone out of the lines. I'll paint the tray next. Now while in the picture the tray is completely rusted out, I would assume that back in the day, in its glory, it was just a silver color. So I'm going to stick with the glory day look of it and paint it silver. I always start silver with a layer of gray. Again, for the same reason as the gold looks better over top of the yellow, the silver will adhere better to the gray paint than if you just tried to paint it directly onto the wood. So as you can see, I painted the rest of the separator black along with that post in the back. I found for the bowl up on the top though that silver nail polish worked better than acrylic paint. Acrylic paint just doesn't really stick to plastic all that well. I've also painted that piece with silver and attached it. And now I just need to add this piece underneath that big bowl. And this little piece needs to sit far enough back on that base so that the handle where the nozzle comes out of the large bowl comes out over top of the small bowl of that section. Now while that piece is drying, let's finish this handle. I'm just going to paint the bottom part of it brown so that it looks a little closer to what the picture is. I'm just adding a little bit of glue to the end of the wire that comes out of that part of the handle. And now I can feed that wire into that little hole that I drilled into the side of the base. We're getting close. I need to make now these spouts, and I'm going to just use a small plastic straw that came out of a juice box. And I've cut it off on an angle, and I'm just going to cut off about 1.25 inches of length for each of them, and then I'll place them using some glue onto the two parts there of that piece that they belong to. I'm also curving that little cut on the diagonal as well so that it fits better against that round piece. I'm adding a couple of very small pieces of wood into the end that gets glued to the separator just to give it something to hang on to. Now that that wood is glued inside of the straw, we'll just add a little bit of glue here and attach it to the separator. No, just go ahead and do that to the other one as well. Now I just need to make the spout. So I'm going to use just a little barbecue skewer for this piece. So I'm going to start by just taking off a small piece off of the end. And then I'll take another piece of the slightly wider part for the nozzle itself. I do find that it's not quite as tapered as I want it, so I'm just carving it down just a touch just to bring it back to a tapered edge. And then I'll go ahead and cut off a piece. So this will be the base of the spout, and then that first little piece that I cut off is going to be the handle for the spout. While I'm waiting for that little nozzle to dry, I'm going to attach a little ring to the front of the base. If you look at the picture, you'll see that there is a hook that goes into a ring that I think helps just to support that ledge that the pail sits on. So I've got just a piece of fabric here, and I'm going to, with some podge, just put it onto the base of the cream separator about halfway, and then I'm going to slide that little jump ring onto the fabric and then podge it down on the other side. So once it's completely dry, then that ring should be completely attached then to the cream separator. I'll just get a little bit more podge to do the top part. There we go. Now I'll also add a layer on top of that as well, just to make sure that it doesn't slide off. So this little nozzle is dry now, and I've painted it silver, and now all I have to do is attach it to the front of that bottom of the bowl. So I painted that black now, and I've just made a little bit of a hook out of a piece of wire. So I've just bent it up into this hook shape, and then I have attached the other end of that wire to the bottom of that little shelf where the pail would sit. The only thing left to do now is just to paint those spouts, and again I'm using just some silver nail polish to do that, and the coverage is beautiful on this plastic straw. So I do notice now in the picture, so there's this little gold emblem on the front, which is too tiny for me to paint on there. I'd have to use an eyelash or something like that. So I'm not going to put that emblem on, but I do also see that there is a gold stripe that goes around the base of that rectangle piece. So I'm going to try and paint that on. I'm going to freehand it, so hopefully it'll be straight and neat, and if not, then I'll just go over the edges with some black paint. So the gold stripe actually went on there fairly easily. I did have to touch it up a little bit with the black paint, but I'm happy with how that turned out for sure. So there is the cream separator. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I had a lot of fun making this one. It wasn't near as difficult as I thought it was going to be, so I'm pretty happy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the homestead porch, and in our next video we'll do a tour of that porch. I'll show you all the really cool and fun things that I've collected for the porch, and that room will then be finished. Until the next time, have an awesome day, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.